Do you think traditional food in your country is becoming less popular?
All right, notice what just happened. The examiner took a simple part 1 topic, last episode it was ice cream, and turned it into something abstract, something philosophical. And this is where most candidates completely fall apart.
Why do they fall apart?
Because they're prepared for, do you like ice cream? But they're not prepared for, what does food say about a society? And honestly, that jump from concrete to abstract is the single biggest hurdle in IELTS speaking. So today, episode 23, we're building the bridge.
Right, hello and welcome back everyone. I'm Felicity and that's Anthony, who has just thrown us straight into the deep end of part 3.
No warm-up, just dive in.
Quick reminder for new listeners, Anthony has spent over a decade as an actual IELTS speaking examiner, thousands of real tests, and the part 3 discussion section is where he says he saw the biggest gap between candidates who'd been studying and candidates who'd been actually preparing strategically.
Massive gap, because here's the thing. Part 1, you can sort of fake with personality. Part 2, you can fake with vocabulary. But part 3 will expose you if you don't have a thinking framework. So today, episode 23, we're connecting directly to last week's ice cream episode and showing you how to take any simple topic and elevate it to a part 3 discussion.
Let's do it. I'll be the examiner. Anthony, you're the candidate. And listeners, pay close attention. These are real part 3 question patterns you'll meet in the test.
Ready when you are.
Do you think traditional food in your country is becoming less popular?
That's a really interesting question. I'd say yes and no, actually. There's certainly been a noticeable shift towards more international cuisine, particularly among younger people. You walk through any major city these days and you see Korean barbecue, Italian pasta places, American fast food chains everywhere. So in that sense, yes, traditional dishes are perhaps competing for attention in a way they didn't used to. That said, I wouldn't say traditional food is dying. If anything, I think there's almost a counter movement happening. A lot of younger chefs are actually returning to their roots and reinventing traditional recipes for a modern audience. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword. On one hand, traditional food is losing some of its everyday presence. On the other, it's gaining new respect as something special, almost ceremonial.
Okay, Anthony, that was lovely. Let me jump in before you go further, because there's already so much to break down. What did you do in those 45 seconds?
Right, so part 3 has its own special rules, and let me unpack them. Technique number 1, acknowledge the complexity. I started with yes and no, actually. That immediately tells the examiner this person isn't going to give a one-sided answer. They're going to think it through.
And that's a sophisticated move, because most students go straight to yes or no.
Yeah, and that's a band 5 to 6 move. As soon as you hedge with yes and no, or it depends, or that's a really nuanced question, you signaled band 7 plus thinking. Technique number 2, give evidence and examples. I didn't just say international food is more popular. I said Korean barbecue, Italian pasta, American fast food chains. Specific examples ground abstract claim.
And that feels effortless when you say it, but I imagine it's actually quite hard to do under pressure.
It is hard under pressure, which is why you need to practice generating examples. Pick any abstract topic, education, technology, family, and force yourself to come up with 3 concrete examples in 10 seconds. That's drill work.
Okay, technique number 3.
Technique 3, and this is the killer one for part 3, the counter movement. I said, that said, and then offered the opposite perspective. Traditional food isn't dying, there's actually a counter movement. That's what examiners call a balanced view, and it's pure Band-Aid territory.
Because most students just pick a side and defend it.
Right, but part 3 isn't a debate, it's a discussion. The examiner doesn't want to know what you believe, they want to see you thinking. And thinking means acknowledging complexity, showing both sides, even if you ultimately lean one way.
Brilliant. Right, give me another question. Let me push deeper into the abstract.
At me.
Right. Why do you think fast food has become so popular around the world?
Well, there are probably several factors at play. The most obvious one is convenience. Modern lifestyles are increasingly busy, and fast food fits into that lifestyle in a way that traditional cooking simply doesn't. You can grab a meal in 5 minutes instead of spending an hour preparing one. But I think it goes deeper than convenience. There's also the marketing aspect. Companies like McDonald's and KFC have spent decades building global brands, and they've made fast food feel almost aspirational in some developing countries, a symbol of modernity, of being part of the global conversation. And then there's the affordability factor. In many places, fast food is genuinely cheaper than cooking from scratch with fresh ingredients, which is, well, it's a sad commentary on modern food economics, but it's true. So I'd say it's a combination of convenience, marketing, and economics, all working together.
Brilliant. And you used a beautiful linking phrase. This could be attributed to. Repeat it for listeners.
Actually, I think I said there are several factors at play, but this could be attributed to is the more sophisticated version. Let me drill it. Flow clear. This could be attributed to. Use it like this. The decline of traditional cooking could be attributed to changing lifestyles, urbanization, and the rise of dual income households. See how that single phrase lets you list multiple causes elegantly?
That's gorgeous. And it sounds so academic.
It is academic, and part three is the academic part of IELTS speaking. The examiner wants to hear that kind of language, so lean into it. And quick reminder for everyone listening, if you're finding this episode useful, please hit subscribe. We're building a complete strategic toolkit for IELTS speaking, episode by episode, and you don't want to miss the next ones.
Right. Let me ask you one more, Anthony, because part 3 questions often get progressively harder. Let me give you the deepest one.
Bring it.
Examiner tone. What are the implications of losing traditional food culture for future generations?
That's a really significant question, actually. The implications, I think, are quite profound. Food is much more than just sustenance, it's a carrier of cultural memory, of family history, of identity. So when traditional food culture fades, we're not just losing recipes, we're losing a connection to our ancestors, to the seasons, to the local landscapes that shaped how people ate. Having said that, I don't think it's necessarily a one-way street. There are passionate movements all over the world dedicated to preserving traditional cuisine in Italy, in Japan, in Mexico, and these movements are increasingly influential. So perhaps the future isn't about losing traditional food entirely, but about finding new ways to keep it alive in a globalized world. It's a double edged sword in many ways. We gain access to incredible global variety, but we risk losing something irreplaceable in the process.
Beautiful. And listeners, notice how Anthony just gave a Band 9 answer to a genuinely difficult question. Anthony, what was the structural move there?
Three things layered together. First, implication language. Food is much more than just sustenance. That's me showing I can think about the topic, not just describe it. Second, the balanced view again. Having said that, that phrase is gold for part three. It lets you pivot from one side to the other without sounding contradictory. Third, the closing reflection. It's a double edged sword in many ways. That's a sophisticated metaphorical phrase that closes the answer with elegance.
Right, Anthony, let's bring it home. 3 takeaways. What does the listener need to remember?
Okay, number one, acknowledge complexity from the very first sentence. Don't dive in with yes or no. Start with yes and no, or that's a really nuanced question, or there's no simple answer to that. This single move signals Band 7 plus thinking before you've even made your point.
Number 2.
Number two, use cause analysis for any why question. Break the question into multiple factors. 2 factors minimum, 3 is better. This could be attributed to A, B, and C. That structure forces you to give a developed, sophisticated answer instead of a one-line opinion.
Got it. And number 3?
Number 3, master the balanced view phrase. Having said that, use it in every part 3 answer if you can. It lets you offer one perspective, then pivot to the opposite perspective without contradicting yourself. It's the most powerful single phrase in the entire Part 3 toolkit.
Beautiful. Acknowledge complexity, use cause analysis, master having said that.
And here's the bigger lesson. Last episode, we talked about ice cream as a Part 1 topic. This episode, we took that exact same theme, food, and turned it into a Part 3 discussion about globalization, tradition, and cultural identity. That's what IELTS does. It builds, it escalates. So when you prepare a topic, prepare it at all three levels. Part 1 personal, Part 2 narrative, Part 3 abstract. That's the complete preparation.
Right, before we wrap, quick teaser for next time. Episode 24, we're heading back into Part 2 with another cue card. The topic is Describe a traditional celebration in your country. And it's the perfect natural follow-up to today's food and culture discussion. Anthony's going to give you a complete framework for any describe a celebration question, because they come up constantly in IELTS.
It's a fun one to prepare. Subscribe so you don't miss it. And in the meantime, this week, take any topic you talk about in Part 1 and force yourself to discuss it at the Part 3 abstract level. Practice that drill. It's the single best Part 3 drill there is.
Until next time, keep practicing, keep thinking deeply, and we'll see you in the next one.
Cheers, everyone.